Nubia, a sub-brand of ZTE, has just launched this device that is very focused on music. Its name is Nubia Music. Join me to know it in this review. First, let's talk about its price, which in Mexico was officially announced at 2,799 pesos. That's more or less $160, although remember that the prices here are not the same as over there. In Mexico, taxes are included, but it is still a slightly higher price than we would like since its official distribution is through Telcel. However, you could also find it on Amazon or Mercado Libre at a much more competitive and more appropriate price, considering the specifications and features that this device has. So you can find it at 1,730 pesos, that is approximately $100. This price is much fairer if you are going to buy it on Telcel. I would not recommend it as much. We started talking about the design because it is probably one of its most attractive points on the front. However, you could also find it on Amazon or Mercado Libre at a much more competitive and more appropriate price, considering the specifications and features that this device has. So you find it at 1,730 pesos. That's approximately $100. This price is much fairer if you are going to buy it on Telcel. I would not recommend it as much. We start talking about the design because it is probably one of its most attractive points on the front. Here on the right side we find the volume buttons and the power button in a red hue that gives a nice distinctive to this gold frame with metallic appearance. Although it is plastic on the top, it comes with two headphone jacks. This is one of its strongest points and definitely something that could be attractive to many users who might even buy this cell phone only as a music player without using it as a cell phone for other things. On the left side is the tray where you can insert the nano SIM card and also a micro SD card. And finally at the bottom we find the USB port and a microphone. But what is most striking is the back cover, which comes with a mosaic finish in different colors. We find blue, yellow, red and cream, giving it a rather youthful touch and obviously give it a good look as a music player, especially integrating a speaker of very good size. We will talk for a moment about its quality, but at least aesthetically it is very striking how it is distributed. It also highlights the integration of DTS:X audio, although it is a single speaker, and next to this speaker we will find a flash and the two cameras, all this in a small acrylic plate that indefinitely rounds well. The design looks attractive. Obviously, it does not come with any level of water resistance and in this case has a thickness of 8.6 millimeters and weighs 199 grams, although there is also another edition in yellow color that does not come with this mosaic of different colors. For those who want a monochrome edition, the screen will be simple. Its size is 6.6 inches. It comes with HD plus resolution, nothing more, to be more precise at 1612 by 720 pixels. So with that resolution it only reaches 267 pixels per inch. So even small print text you're going to notice that it might reveal a few pixels. We are talking about LCD technology, so it does not have good viewing angles. If you look at the device from the side, it will have much less brightness and less color, so it is a device more intended for personal use. Viewing the device from the front, the screen will look good. Fortunately, it integrates 90 Hz into its refresh rate, so the animations and scrolling that you do in the system are going to look a little bit smoother. And in this case, if it is perceived as a device of the 2024, although obviously with a device of the low range, but it has a screen that does respond well to movements through software, incorporates dark mode, reading mode, night mode to have a little more comfortable experience on the screen, which by the way has a maximum brightness, barely good for indoors, and minimum brightness if positive. Even remember that through the accessibility options, we will find an extra dimming option with which you can even further decrease the brightness. So I think it can be considered a comfortable screen. Although LCD screens are usually a little cooler than we would like, but it also has an option to try to adapt the color temperature of the screen, but definitely in no option are you going to find an ultra advanced display. Overall, it's a device that behaves in a straightforward manner. Let's talk about the sound because I think it is one of the points that can get the most attention in this device, although not necessarily for its quality, but rather for its design. Because as I anticipated the design, it gives the impression that it will be a very specialized speaker, which will sound very loud and with high quality. However, it is a fairly simple speaker. Also, being just a single speaker, it does not integrate stereo sound, and that definitely leaves a lot to be desired. It's not a device that I would consider very specialized in the speaker. It's a speaker that is going to sound simple. Let's listen to a little test, but remember, it's not the same as listening to it live. At the software level, as I was giving you a heads up, it comes with DTS-X Ultra, so it comes with some presets for different styles of sound that you might get to take advantage of, and a 10-band graphic equalizer where you can modify the sound style. So at least these can become a highlight so you can set up the sound the way you like it. But I insist, it is not a speaker that is going to sound with a lot of quality. I think where it comes to stand out more is in the incorporation of 2 headphone jacks, as I mentioned a moment ago. So if you want to use it as a media player to share music with friends, it could be a very interesting option. And the behavior of these jacks is curious. If you connect 2 headphones with microphones, the behavior is fine. If you connect 2 headphones without microphones, it's also fine. But if one of the 2 headphones has a microphone and the other one doesn't, the behavior could get a little bit strange. Only when you disconnect the hearing aid that does not have a microphone will you notice that the playback stops. But if you disconnect or connect the headphone which has a microphone, it does not do any action. It is just a curious behavior that I wanted to tell you, but in general the volume is well maintained in both jacks, and with wireless headphones you could also get to have a sophisticated experience. Consider that it supports the LDSC codec, which is a fairly advanced codec which have high-end headphones to have a high-resolution audio and even connected by Bluetooth. This device only incorporates 1 microphone, which is definitely a negative thing, although at this price there are several other devices that do the same, so we could not get so demanding, but definitely that it will be simple. Let's listen to a test of this microphone.
Esta es una prueba de audio grabada con el Nubia Music, que solo integra un micrófono, así que hay que tener cuidado, taparlo porque no se va a oír bien.
Well, as you could see, by integrating a single microphone, not only has the disadvantage of not recording stereo sound, but also if you get to cover that microphone, the sound will be cut off. There is no doubt that this microphone becomes too saturated, so it would not be something recommended if you like to record concerts or very noisy places. The front camera is 5 megapixels with 2.4 aperture and obviously fixed focus. The device is quite slow when taking these pictures, even if you're not pushing it too hard, and if you try to capture multiple pictures at the same time, it's also going to get slower. It doesn't have any burst when you hold down the shutter or start video or anything like that. It is simple, although a button is integrated for beauty options, where we can have skin smoothing, brighten, enlarge or reduce the size of cheeks and the like. However, you can't enable the shutter by showing your palm. The only additional gesture you have for easy photo capture is by showing your smile, although that gesture sometimes doesn't react quite right. At the top, you'll also find a button to show the color filters you can use while you're capturing your selfies. And the timer and other settings are hidden inside the additional camera settings. As you can see, the selfies have a low level of detail and a bit low and pale color, so the selfies will definitely be very simple. Please note that HDR is disabled by default, and obviously the preview looks poorly optimized. If you take the picture without HDR, the backlit background will still look very overexposed and burnt, so it's not ideal. The ideal is to enable HDR, which, as you realize, includes a special indicator, and when you enable HDR, it somehow manages to balance a little better. Lights and shadows, but definite. Mind that it is a fairly simple device. At nights, we also confirm that it is a device that is not able to have well-lit pictures or with good level of detail, even if you are in front of some light source. And obviously, if it is a backlit photograph, the result will be even worse, confirming that it is a simple front camera. Although curiously, it is able to take portrait pictures even at night. But again, as I say, with too much noise and poor definition in the daytime, obviously the portraits will be of better quality, but it is not able to detect objects that are in the foreground. So photography will not come out very natural in these scenarios. And as a curious detail, the device allows us to do a 4x digital zoom on the front camera, which is definitely very simple. Consider that it's a 5 megapixel camera, so it can't do much more. The rear photographic system is composed of the 24mm camera with 50 megapixels on its sensor, autofocus and f-aperture 1.8. The second camera is artificial intelligence camera, which you know is a nice way of saying to useless cameras. The viewfinder, as usual, shows a little delay, but that happens in all smartphones today. But doing the capture speed test, we found that it takes about a quarter of a second or so to capture the moment, so it's not so good at capturing the perfect instant. The burst takes about half a second or so to start, although it is a burst of 30 pictures and it is also quite slow, so the time between one picture and another picture is practically a quarter of a second, so it could also be difficult to extract the exact moment. On the main interface, we also find the same beauty options that we saw for the front camera and the same color filters. And watch out, because it also has a pro mode where we have more parameters like compensation, shutter speed, which can be up to a fifth of a second, ISO that can go up to 3200, white balance, focus, and some other little things that you can customize, but obviously it doesn't take raw pictures. It's a simple device in that respect. For scanning QR codes, there's a specific mode that you can access on the camera that's going to serve you for these actions, or you also have a shortcut to Google Lens in the top left corner, where you could also perform this action. So in this sense, I think it does deliver good quality, although it doesn't have an option to scan documents. The device does incorporate a 50 megapixel mode, so you can take higher resolution pictures. But honestly, it's not as high a level of detail as we'd like. And note that in moving situations, it struggles to get a sharp picture, especially in this case where we were in a cloudy outdoor environment. It seems to me that the pictures are still of good quality. In this case, it seems that if you get to have a little more saturation in the colors to have a good photograph. However, there are other scenarios where the camera behaves with a much paler coloration. Then it is a bit inconsistent. As you can see in this case, backlit does integrate automatic HDR, but it is not so smart because, for example, in this case did not use it, therefore the result came out with little lighting in the shadows area, confirming that it is a simple device in that aspect. For night photography, the result is what we could expect from a device of this price. That is, there is a lot of noise in some areas and little definition, especially in darker areas. Although if you use the night mode, notice how it eliminates much of the noise and only retains a bit of grain that fortunately makes the picture look with good detail. As for the zoom range, obviously we won't have something very advanced. You're looking at a picture with 1x, then with 2x, where you immediately start to lose quality, and the maximum zoom it supports is 4x. Obviously, it's a digital without much quality. Obviously, it's a digital without too much quality, and you're going to notice that also some areas start to overexpose. So it's a very simple photograph. Fortunately, this main camera can focus on close objects to take macro pictures. And if you zoom in 2x, I think the result could still look a bit more appealing. Note that it is also capable of taking panoramic pictures even though it doesn't integrate an ultra-wide camera, and honestly, it does it with good quality. It's not high-resolution photography, but for the price I think it does. It takes good panoramic photos. Finally, as for portrait photography, unfortunately it is not able to focus on objects in the foreground, confirming us that it does a very simple treatment for portrait photos. If there is only your face or your body, perhaps the result will be a little better. The bokeh effect it generates in the background is very nice, but it definitely fails a lot in detecting the edges of the foreground. For video recording, you will notice that the device goes up to full HD at 30 frames per second, so it does well in its price range. When starting your video recording, you will have a simple slider for zooming, but shortcuts are lost. You can swipe or refresh your video recording and take pictures while recording, and you are not allowed to flash while recording. And in video recording, we will also have a very simple result. It even looks at a low bit per second rate right away. Even if you're not walking, you can tell you don't have stabilization. So it's simple wherever you want to see it in backlighting. Obviously, it's also going to perform very poorly, so ideally you want to record with the front lighting and not the backlighting at night. Also notice how it gets to suffer quite a bit. In fact, it goes to a lower frame rate per second to try to get more light in, and the focus starts to get too confused. As I anticipated, it has neither optical nor digital stabilization, so even without walking it is noticeable. When you're walking, it's much more noticeable, and when you're running, it's much more noticeable. The device does not have slow motion, but it does have fast motion. Interestingly, although it is not stabilized, and in this case it can go from 4x, which can be useful for recording people, or can go up to 1800x. So yes, you could get to record very attractive landscapes, although obviously for that you do need to leave the device on a base to have an optimal experience. Finally, as for the focus, note that in aggressive movements and in well-lit environments you could get to have a slightly good experience, but remember that it is a fairly simple device in everything that has to do with the camera, so there are times where it battles more. Also, it doesn't have any additional modes that we usually mention in other reviews. So again, it's a very simple device. And the front camera is also going to record very simply. In fact, it's only HD resolution, so it's going to have a simple result, although it does allow us to zoom in just like what we saw in the picture, which is pretty rare. But as I say, it doesn't have stabilization. Obviously, in backlighting, it's not going to perform well. So it's a pretty simple device, and obviously when recording at night, you're going to notice the low quality even more, although curiously, there's not as much noise as you could see in the picture. So you get to defend more or less well as long as you have some light source nearby, otherwise the result will be quite dark. This device comes with Android 13 and iOS 13, which is Nubia's custom system. As you realize, it comes outdated from the factory, and we definitely don't like that because it also doesn't have a clear update policy that lets us know for sure whether or not it's going to be updated to the next version. Honestly, it will most likely never receive a next update, so it will be very simple in this aspect, and the operating system really offers few added features. While it has a different aesthetic than pure Android, it doesn't really have that many things. It does have a feature called Super Lock that what it will do is change your lock screen background every time you try to unlock your cell phone, just so it doesn't look so monotonous. It also allows you to change the speed of the system animations, something that could be useful if you want to perceive that the device is a little more agile. It also has a feature called Active Island that will allow you to take advantage of a small animation around the front camera when you charge your phone or when you are in a few other applications, but honestly they are not very well used. It's just a nice animation, but an option that can get a lot of attention is one that is called rhythmic lights. In this case, a very nice animation will appear on the screen. On the edge, you can select the colors that will have this animation and the animation style, and it will be synchronized with the music playback so that you can have a nice effect when you are playing music. That's why I tell you that this device could perfectly be used as a music player only without using the rest of the features. This rhythmic light effect is compatible with YouTube Music, Spotify, and Claro Music, Shazam, and YouTube, in addition to other possible applications, but of the ones I have installed. Those appear compatible, and in the center of the speaker has a kind of notification LED that for notifications or calls could get to work. Supposedly, it also works to synchronize with music, although specifically with music it does not seem to me to work well. There are times when it does and times when it doesn't, and it also has very little power. So you can't really distinguish it clearly. You can customize its color, and you can also program a specific schedule in which you want it to be working. But as I say, I don't think it's as attractive as it sounds. As I say, the system looks pretty simple. If you buy it with Telcel, it will come with a lot of Telcel bloatware. In this case, it obviously has a haptic motor on the Z-axis. The device also integrates a section to avoid unintentional touches on the edges of the screen that you can completely customize to your liking. This Nubia Music integrates a fingerprint reader in the power button, something very good because normally in low-cost devices the fingerprint reader is sacrificed, but in this case, if it is incorporated and also supports up to 5 records, its recognition is going to be good enough. Obviously, it is not the most advanced in the industry, but its incorporation is appreciated. In fact, one highlight is that through the settings you could select which application you want to open. When you unlock with a specific fingerprint, then you could speed up certain processes a bit. Obviously, it also has facial recognition, but this is a fairly simple one that is not worth talking about too much. Yes, it does incorporate Google Smart Lock so you can select some secure environments where you want the device to stay unlocked. It also has Google's autofill feature to fill in passwords automatically, although it doesn't do fingerprint verification, so you have to be careful. It also integrates the My Vault app, which is a sort of combination between a secure folder and app lock, since there you can store not only images and videos, but also apps and even passwords so that everything is safeguarded with your fingerprint. It has no child mode, no VPN, and no collaboration with an antivirus. The battery is 5000 milliamps, a very traditional capacity in the smartphone market. However, in the test I did, it seems that the processor is not so efficient in power consumption, as it reached 3 hours with 44 minutes in my test, running the drainer in the foreground slightly below what we would have liked. But in the background, it improved a little, reaching up to 4 hours with 24 minutes. However, we did notice that it was constantly shutting down the drainer running in the background. And this test, translated to real life, could mean that some apps that may be important to you get shut down completely if they are running in the background, which could cause you to miss some important notifications. Then you have to go into the settings to try to adjust which apps you want to definitely not close, and you could still end up with very aggressive management of these apps. So the battery is below average than we would have liked. Fortunately, it does have a normal power saving mode, and it also has an ultra power saving mode that could help you in some emergencies. In fact, you could buy this device as a music player and enable the ultra power saving mode so that you only have a music player available there and make the battery last much longer. This device includes a 10-watt charger. It is a super simple charger. In my test with 15 minutes of charging, it recovered 11% power. With 30 minutes, it got up to 22%, and the full charge finished in 150 minutes, which is 2.5 hours, which honestly isn't bad at all compared to other devices I've tested that take 3 hours when they are low end. However, it doesn't have smart charging or charge lock, so if you're tempted to leave it charging overnight, consider that could affect battery performance in the long run. This device incorporates support for quad-G networks. It does not integrate a specific mobile data lock mode, so you cannot select which apps will be able to access the internet with your mobile data and which apps can only access the internet via Wi-Fi. By the way, it doesn't even support Wi-Fi 5, so it's a very outdated version. Obviously, the download speed will be slow, and if you consider it's going to be a music player, it's possibly going to take a bit longer than it should to download the music. But hey, bear with it. Integrates Bluetooth 5.2. This is pretty good considering again that it might be a music player. It's going to have good compatibility and stability with some headphones considering its price. It does not have NFC, and one highlight is that it does integrate FM radio and works without the need for headphones connected. Another curious thing is that it can also project your screen wirelessly, although only in mirror format, but it is something that does not always come in such basic devices. In fact, it also integrates Android Auto compatibility, so also if you want it as a player for your car, it could be an option. And as for sensors, it integrates only an accelerometer, but no gyroscope, no magnetic field or other sensors. It really comes very simple in this, and the proximity sensor seems to be more contact sensor because in this case it did not manage to enable it when the hand is close, but only when I fully touch the device. So it may be simple, but at least it looks like it's not from the virtual sensors. And the Nubia ecosystem is still very short. You know that in this case it depends heavily on Google and its technologies like QuickShare or Google FastPay to interact with other devices from other brands. It also relies on Google Drive for cloud storage and Google Home for controlling home devices. So in this sense, Nubia is still not very strong. Let's get to the app opening test. While I tell you what processor it integrates, which is the Unisoc SC9863A. A super basic and super old processor, so don't expect high performance here. In fact, that's why we're only going to open 10 applications in this test. We usually open 16, but it's a super simple device. It also comes with 4 GB of RAM, although fortunately in this case the operating system isn't that heavy, but it's still a bit low RAM capacity. And presto, it took 9.5 seconds on average to open each of these applications, but the funny thing is that it closed the timer showing a lot of weakness in terms of RAM management. In the settings, you'll notice that an option for another 4 GB of virtual RAM is already enabled, but you know that virtual RAM is generally useless and you've already figured that out. It comes with 128 gigabytes of storage, which is good, and it supports putting a micro SD on it, which is even better. Next, we're going to test how long it takes to export a video, stitching together 4 clips recorded with this device, totaling 1 minute in length, all in full HD, and that's it. It's done exporting. It took 1 minute and 5 seconds. It definitely takes a long time, so it's not recommended for video editing. That's what we were anticipating. For games, note that they don't have any manager application or additional tools. Obviously, being such an inexpensive device, we expect that the performance will also be very simple. In Call of Duty, it should be noted that we did not download the HD material because it is a fairly simple device. We selected the low graphics quality at a high frames per second rate, which is the maximum it gave us compatible. And in this case, with this graphics quality, the performance was honestly good. 34 frames per second on average. Obviously, you don't see very attractive and very advanced graphics, but if you play with this kind of simple configuration, yes, it can still give you an acceptable fluidity. We could even say outstanding, considering the price range. Obviously, as I told you from the beginning of the video, if you find it at the Amazon or Mercado Libre price, it will be something even more attractive. And note please that it can record your screen, and even if you record while playing, the result is still acceptable, although it does decrease its performance a bit, but you could even get to make gameplays as long as you play in low graphic quality. In the case of Free Fire, this device by default gives us graphics in standard quality. In this case, we went down to smooth graphics but cranked the frames up as high as we could to see what it was capable of. And again, the performance was honestly very good at this graphics setting, so if you want to game, you can do it smoothly as long as you select a low graphics quality so you can have a good experience. We would highlight that the temperature in this case was 41.9 degrees Celsius. It had a good stability. So you are not going to be able to play with very advanced graphics, but at least it does give you a smooth experience with simple graphics. Obviously, it's not free of hiccups. In this case, especially when you go in the car, is where you might get to notice some loss of frames per second, but it actually behaves very well. And finally, in Asphalt 9, we set it to 60 frames per second to see what it was capable of, but we kept the default graphics quality. I must say that when monitoring frames per second, the device is a bit slow. For example, in Free Fire, it gave us an average of 44, but without monitoring, it does seem to run a little smoother. And the same thing happens here in Asphalt. The average was 27 monitoring, but without monitoring, it seems to go a little smoother. But actually, at no point does the device freeze. When loading some special animations, you can get to have a little stumble, but nothing really serious. Although I insist you should always adjust the graphic quality so that it does not have very heavy effects, because in fact the device does not support many of these effects. So it's simple, but you can get to play acceptably with this device. So as a conclusion, it is a device whose strongest point I think are the 2 headphone jacks, which is difficult to find in other devices, but it does not have much more. Honestly, it is a very economical device, so we could not get so demanding with it. I hope you liked this video. If you did, you know that you can tell us about it, and see you next time.